I think my neighbor is watching me through my attic, so I moved into a duplex with my ex 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison. Later would see all of the swastika tattoos, and had been doing and continues to do landscape work for the rentals like mow the lawns, cut down trees, etc. Other than that, he is home mostly doing odds and ends things like tinkering with his mower or truck or something. They both are super nice people, very kind and loving towards others, and always offer to help out. We have smoked weed together a few times. Ed smokes more than Amber, and have talked about all kinds of things, so I thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned how sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear steps in the attic over my room and what sounds like a chair being dragged. How sometimes the noise follows me around the house and always freaks me out to the point of calling someone just to feel a little safer until the noises die down. Ed said, "What, you think we're spying on you?" In a laughing way, but it creeped me out a little. So then, I break up with my boyfriend and he moves out. This is recent, so a few months ago. Ed started texting me asking if I wanted to smoke while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses. I still felt uncomfortable around him. Then he asked if I wanted to have sex with him. He thinks Amber is cheating on him. I shut that down and it was awkward AF. I didn't tell Amber I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension, and I hate confrontation, so I kept quiet. That's when I start to hear things in the attic above my room more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at about 3/4 am. When I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but no one around. I kept the lockpick, and the next day, I texted a picture of it to Amber to let her know I thought someone was creeping around, and she said, "Oh, that's Ed's. That's his ice pick, not a lockpick, sweetie. No one can pick your deadbolt with that." But I know the difference in a 4-inch skinny lockpick and an ice pick. I'm so scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect, and it's not outlandish to think he could be up there spying on me. I even found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling of my room. I just put wadded up paper in it and try not to think of it. I honestly hope nothing comes of it, and I'm just being paranoid. Edit, for everyone saying to call the police. I really have no evidence. I have the lockpick still and pictures of my door being messed with, but when I've gone into the attic, it's been completely empty. I've never gone in alone. Its opening is in my garage and there is no ladder, so it requires 2 people, but as of now it is a gaping hole above my washer and dryer and very hard to get into without good upper body strength. I'd call my ex to come home when the dragging would start, and by the time he got there, it'd be cleared out. So I'm hesitant to report anything with no evidence. This is 100% true. I'm staying with my BF until I move out in a few weeks, despite my neighbors being upset I'm leaving. To address another thing, I didn't see any swastika tattoos until months after I had been hanging out on their back porch to smoke with them. He had his shirt off for the first time and there were at least 3 on his body. Confused me. Amber and Ed are super Wiccan. She has Wicca tattoos all over and stuff, and so I believe maybe his tattoos were for protection in prison. Either way, after that, I stopped hanging with them and would only speak to them if we were both outside at the same time. Neighbor was obsessed with us. In my old neighborhood, about a decade ago, we had a new neighbor move in the house across from us. It was a middle-aged woman who lived by herself and mostly kept to herself. If you approached her or waved, she would respond back, and for the most part she seemed pretty friendly, but something was kind of off about her behavior. I would be playing with my friends out in the front yard and she would just sit on her patio and watch us for hours, blatantly. If she wasn't watching us from her patio, she was peeking through her curtains at us. We felt like we were being watched by her 24/7. We rarely seen her openly staring at any of our other neighbors so much. One night I was up watching television with my parents in our den and we saw our lights come on in front of the house and someone's silhouette in the window. By the time my dad went to check, whoever it was left, and he didn't see any noticeable signs of suspicious activity, so we just brushed it off and decided to go to sleep. The next morning, as my dad was leaving for work early, he noticed our solar panel lamps that were stuck in the lawn alongside our driveway were missing, and the soil was still disturbed from them being plucked out of the ground, pulling out of the driveway. he sees all 5 of our solar panel lamps lining our neighbor's driveway, just like we had them in our yard. He was so amused he called my mom and I, who were still asleep, out to see for ourselves, and sure enough our lamps were sticking in her yard. We didn't say anything, because we're not the confrontational type, and after all they were just some cheap lights, nothing of great value. The neighbor acted as normal as ever. Every day, smiling, waving, staring, small talk. After this incident, we noticed things like our Christmas and Halloween decorations getting vandalized / going missing almost every year. Coincidence? Also, no one else's decorations on our block was distributed, until we eventually stopped decorating, and how our neighbor would copy our near every move. If we bought a garden gnome, you bet she'd have one in her yard the next day. If my mom wore a sun hat, she'd wear one too. If my parents and I were out raking leaves, she'd come out and do the same. Still, we never confronted her about anything or treated her differently, because she didn't feel like a threat necessarily. We don't live there anymore, not because of her, but every now and then I remember the incident with the lights and how brazen she was. I don't know if this post belongs here, but this experience felt pretty creepy to me at the time, being a kid, knowing you're being watched every day and having someone constantly lurk around your property while you're asleep/unaware. I'm probably just overreacting. I think my neighbor is stalking me. Neighbor has been stalking me for a month. I have noticed my neighbor doing some pretty creepy shit. The initial encounter was about a month ago while I was walking my dog up a street that's about a quarter mile from my house. The man was talking with a group of people, 3, and as I walked by he ran up to pet my dog. He was asking me questions about my dog, such as name and gender. He then began to ask me questions about where I lived, but more so asking for confirmation as if he somehow knew already. You live at XYZ, right? This made me uncomfortable, so I went to leave, and then he attempted to give me a hug and kiss me on the cheek. Previous to this I had never met this person. After walking away I thought the whole situation was weird, but would proceed with caution in the future. Since then there's been increase in encounters with this neighbor. Such as, walking up the street with my significant other, then the neighbor seemed to be waiting for us as we were walking by. Without saying anything he began calling our dog and trying to pet him. He continued this even as we were walking away. 2 days after the initial encounter, drove by the house 10 times within a short time period. This happened at night while my boyfriend and I were walking the dog. When he saw us he slowed down, turned on his hazards, flashed his headlights, honked, and shouted "Hey" out the window with his music blasting. The song he was blasting happened to be "Window Shopper" by 50 Cent. The circling began once we got in the house. 2 weeks ago, he was in his vehicle, waiting at the edge of the property. I noticed him when I walked outside with my dog, and then he quickly drove off. For 5 days after the circling, lurking at a stop sign in front of my home. As I was returning home from walking the dog, I noticed the neighbor standing near the stop sign looking toward my home. He ran off when he noticed that I had seen him. 4 days ago, he was waiting in his vehicle, on the edge of the property where he had clear view of the basement door. He was noticed by some guests as they left through the door. And he proceeded to drive off. Tonight, all the encounters happened to coincide with when we walk the dog, 4 times a day. I've noticed that he tends to be outside more around the times I would normally walk the dog. In that situation I go back inside and wait 45 minutes to walk, or go to the dog park for an hour instead. Unfortunately we weren't able to record these encounters, but we plan to start recording our walks from start to end. Along with when we go outside just in case he's there. The frequency has made me feel targeted as well as unsafe while walking my dog. I have taken a photo of the license plate, but I don't have much physical evidence. I'd like to call the police. But without evidence I doubt they can do anything. My next-door neighbor the stalker. I am a 5 feet 3 inches female in my mid-20s, and my housemate, who will be M in this story, is also 5 feet 3 inches in her early 30s. I'm not sure if this is important or not, but hey, we're both 2 girls who have fairly busy lifestyles, so usually there is only one of us at home at a time. I'll also add that I'm planning on moving out by the end of January for unrelated reasons, but also am now worried about my friend's safety. The first incident, I didn't take note of the date as at the time I didn't think anything of it, I just thought it was an annoying inconvenience. It was around 6:30 p.m. when the house bell rang. I'd assumed that it was my friend's boyfriend, Jay, so I locked my cats up on my side of the house as her partner usually always brings his dog around who isn't the greatest fan of smaller animals. After making sure they were safely put away, I went to look around to say hello, but it wasn't Jay. It was our next-door neighbor. Before this point in time I had never seen this man before. At the time I assumed Em had invited him over. She's a popular girl and is always making new friends, so it wouldn't have completely surprised me if she had. So with that I excused myself and went back to my room. I have social anxiety, so didn't want to make small talk with a stranger. Em also has a dog, and when I tell you that she did not like this man, I mean she really didn't like him. He didn't leave until around 9:30 that night and spent the entire time playing the piano in our living room, all the while Em's dog was barking and growling, pacing back and forth between where the two of them were and my side of the house. Assuming she didn't know which one of us to protect from this guy that she clearly didn't trust, it wasn't until the next day when I asked Em about him that she told me he invited himself over and she had to basically beg him to leave so that she could go to sleep for a 3 a.m. shift the next day. I thought it was rude of him, but he seemed innocent enough and didn't think anything more of it. The second incident, 4th of December, Em and Jay had both gone out of town for the week, but luckily for me, my best friend, G, stays at the house whenever he has work, as where he lives is to a faraway drive for him to take every day. It had been a long day of work for the both of us, so after getting into bed we had both passed out. Until I heard the bell ringing. I was in a bit of a haze at first, thinking to myself, shit, it must be morning. Am I expecting someone? Am I late for something? The usual thoughts when one wakes up in the middle of the night. The doorbell rings again. I open my eyes and let them adjust to the dark, and that's when it hits me. It's still night. The bell rings again. I look at my phone to see what the time is, 10:49 p.m. and no missed calls or text messages from anyone I know saying they're on their way to see me. That's when I start to panic. I start to shake G awake, whispering frantically that someone has been ringing the doorbell. It of course takes him a while to realize what's happening, and then when he does, he asks me what time is it. 11 p.m. I reply, my voice shaking. After 6 more bell rings, whoever it is finally gives up. We both bolt out of bed to make sure everything is locked properly, and I start to make phone calls to make 100% certain that no one I know decided to give me a visit without calling first. Of course the answer was obviously that they wouldn't do that. When I called my mother that night, she told me that the both of us were overreacting and that we should have just answered the door. My boyfriend, God bless his cotton socks, came over to calm me down and to also make sure that no one was hanging around. And G went outside to make sure that they didn't touch his car. Everything seemed as normal, so we reluctantly went back to sleep. The next day G and I had a discussion and decided that it was most likely just an Uber driver or some idiot trying to prank us. And that was that never to think about again, until yesterday, 19th of December, Em and I had an exhausting day of work. Christmas season can suck me dick tbh, and decided we deserved pizza and a movie. After the movie was finished and we'd gone outside for a smoke, Em ventured back to the lounge to finish off work stuff and I went to the toilet. This was at 6 p.m. After I was done, I'd heard someone knocking on the door and the dog barking like crazy again. I waited a while to see if Em was going to answer, but after a few minutes she hadn't answered, so I went to do it myself. When I heard Em whispering for me to come into the lounge. That's when she told me not to answer the door because she wasn't expecting anyone and she didn't feel like having a conversation with door knockers that day. The day before we had Christmas people come to the house and she was stuck talking to them for ages. So we both sat on the floor trying to stifle laughs at the dog barking at them to go away. That was until we realized they weren't leaving. They'd knock, go to walk away, and then they'd come back and try knocking again. I know this because I could see their shadow against the blind moving towards where our garage was on the right-hand side. Em tried to peek through the blinds to catch a glimpse of who it might be but couldn't make out who it was. Then after a good while of silence they started to knock and ring the doorbell at the same time. This was when Em finally gave in and answered the door. It was the next door neighbor. "Do you mind if I come inside?" he asks. "Not tonight, sorry, I have work stuff to do and I have to be awake early in the morning," she replies. I can help you, I'm not dumb. She rejects him again and he finally leaves. M closes the door, comes back to the lounge where I am sitting, trying not to look so shocked and weirded out when we just look at each other with a knowing look that says, what the actual fuck? I looked at my phone to see what time it was and it said 6:30. He had stayed trying to get our attention for half an hour, so with all this being said, what do you think? Was this all a coincidence? Was he the person who rang the bell at 11 p.m.? Is he just an innocent lonely guy? Or is he obsessed with my housemate? Truth be told, after this I am worried that once I leave in a few weeks' time she will be alone. So any advice or ideas would be gratefully appreciated. Strange behavior from the neighbors. For reference, I live in the UK. As I write this, it is currently 3:30 a.m., and what I have just witnessed occurred between 2:00 am and 3 a.m. I live across the street from an elderly couple, I'd guess around 75 years old. They seem pretty normal from the outside, although I've never spoken to them. I usually see that their lights are up by the time I move to the bedroom to lay in bed for the night, and not really sleep. Tonight I was laying in bed as usual, watching YouTube videos on my phone, when I heard what I guess was the slamming of the boot of a car across the street. I saw the old lady getting into her car and driving away. This in itself seemed odd, since it was usually the old man that would drive. All the lights in the house had been left on. I decided to forget about it, since she might have had some sort of emergency. I heard her drive back into the driveway around an hour later, as she seemed to speed into it. She appeared to be in a hurry as she was pacing around the car fairly quickly, until she disappeared into the house for a couple minutes. When she returned, she was carrying a stepladder and some hand wipes. She placed the stepladder into the boot of the car and proceeded to use the wipes to wipe down all the windowsills on the front of the house, and once again sped off down the road. All the lights in the house were still left on. I've been peering out the window for about 20 minutes now with no sign of movement in the house, which makes me wonder where the old man would be. I definitely recall seeing him earlier today, as he usually waters the front garden every evening. I don't know if I'm interpreting this wrong, but something about this just doesn't seem right. If anyone could offer some sort of explanation of this behavior, it'd really help clear my head. I'll update this post if she comes back. Update, August 12, 10:46 a.m. I stayed up until just after 5 a.m. to see whether she'd come back or not, but nothing more happened up to that point. I have now woken up to see that her car is back, along with their other car that I couldn't see last night. They have a rounded driveway which isn't completely visible from the window. I assumed the other car was behind the bushes. It's completely possible the old man had driven somewhere that night and she had driven to join him. I agree that the unexplained behavior does seem like dementia, and it is the most likely reasoning. For both cars to now be visible, I assume they are both in the house, and I will keep an eye on the house today for any sign of the old man. Update, August 12, 9:38 p.m. I was out during the day today, and when I returned neither car was in the driveway once again, with what seemed like a note stuck up on the porch window. I didn't want to walk up to the door in case someone was in. I was heading out again for the evening, but as I was pulling out of the driveway, they both returned in the same car the old lady had been driving the night before, with the old man driving like he usually does. It's possible the other car had been kept in the garage last night, as that's where I suspect it is now. I will keep a lookout for any funny business tonight.